today I'm talking to you about remote viewing and dowsing for fun and profit. I've been working with the Ryan Center for about 10 years, and I've learned quite a bit about parapsychology, so I know all of the different subjects that they study. We're going to just stick with the remote viewing and dowsing today. So the history of remote viewing is basically in the military about 1980s. They came to a group of researchers at Stanford Research Institute. They said, we would like to spy on the Soviet Union. We hear that they have a parapsychology program and they're already spying on us. So we want you to develop this program. And they decided to go to this well-known clairvoyant named Ingo Starr. He was a New York artist, and he developed a program that they could teach to other military people. Which, if you're ever military, I'm a veteran, they have to have a protocol for everything. So they have a very visual method of teaching it, because this is an artist and he's a visual guy. So what they taught was you would connect to something he called a signal line, basically your intuition. But you imagine that you're connecting to something, you put pen to paper, and you just start drawing whatever comes to your mind. Some people would write down descriptives. And then when you were done, they would compare that to the target and see whether that was accurate. So their research program was basically sitting somebody in a room, quietly considering what was going on in the world, send some other guy out to Palo Alto, California, somewhere in the town. That person would come back and they would look at what the guy doodled and compare it to where the guy was. And they had some seriously accurate results. Another thing they did with remote viewing is something called associative remote viewing. Because we don't want to use the left analytical side of our brain, we want to use the intuitive, artistic side of our brain. They said, okay, let's create an object, make that object be associated to something else that is more analytical. So they decided to look at the silver futures market. And what futures markets do is decide, next week, are silver futures going up a lot, a little, not at all, and very much going down? So they used associative remote viewing for those 4 questions. And the remote viewer would go in, and before the markets open, would visualize that object. And it was blinded because that person and the researcher did not know what they were looking at. However, the person who was doing the futures market would know what the object was and then would bet on that. So they did this about 10 times. And you would figure maybe 5, maybe 4 times they get it right. All 10 times they were accurate about the silver market. So with this information, there's a Paul H. Smith that I work with on the board of the Rhine, who was also in this program that eventually was called the Stargate program. And he took it to the civilian sector, and there are a lot of remote viewers out there. The organization is called International Remote Viewers Association, IRVA. If you come to my table at 601 down at the corner, you can find out more information about that organization. So these people are hired to find missing objects and to also bet on the stock market, perhaps talk to some people that are interested in, should I do this or should I do that? Can you remote view this? But also they can find objects. So this is a very new process, but it's a very old clairvoyance. Sometimes we need a little help with our clairvoyance. It just doesn't come to us. We need a little tool. And that's just one of the tools that's used. Now dowsing, on the other hand, is antiquity. Been used probably back as far back as the Greeks. We're not entirely certain. But maybe the oracles used it. We're not sure. But we do know that it was brought to bear in the 18th century France. They were using it not just to find water, but also to find minerals. So they would have an object called an L rod. You've probably seen it, or Y rod. It's a birch branch or U branch, and it extends outward, and the rest of it kind of spreads out this way, and they hold on to it like so, and they'd hold it out in front of them, and walk forward, and if it dipped, and they would feel the dip, would come back and try from a different angle and kind of triangulate to see if it was in that spot. It could be water, it could have been iron, any kind of mineral or something like that they were looking for. People still douse, but they use other things called L rods. But L rods are basically, you've probably seen them, people hold them, long rods extending outward in front, and they just hold them gently. When they come forward, they cross if there's something there. It's like X marks the spot. And then you've probably seen people using bobbers. They kind of just bob up and down. So they hold on to them and they get to a point that kind of just flex downward. That's their indication of something. And what I have available at my booth are pendulums. And pendulums are a little more broad use because you can ask questions sort of like from a Ouija board. If you pull out a dowsing card of any particular kind, you can ask the questions. I start by twirling my dowsing pendulum and just letting it twirl, and it'll twirl. And I've made a decision what direction means yes and what direction means no, or you can have it go to a different direction to answer a particular question or decide on a letter or a number on one of those cards. Some of them are chakra cards, some of them are health question cards. There's thousands of options. Another thing you can do is you can use your dowsing pendulum if you have it in your pocket. You can whip it out and say, show me where my phone is. I've left it somewhere in my house. And you can just start the twirling process and it can just kind of guide you through the house until you can find your phone, your keys, or something like that. So that is the history of both of these. Now, how can you use it for fun and profit? I told you about remote viewing. People can learn this process through IRVA or other organizations. Even through the Rhine, we offer classes on remote viewing. And once you've developed the calm mind of a remote viewer, anybody who's doing psychic ability, you need to have a calm mind because that voice is quiet. And you can then get clients to ask you to do certain things. So at the Rhine, we've heard from people that are actually remote viewing aliens. And they're saying one lady has a chart of about 300 different alien types. That's a little hard to verify, right? A little hard to verify. So the best thing you can do with remote viewing is you start with a process that's easy to verify. As I said, the Stanford research folks use this process to verify what was going on. Now, the reason why you want to verify is because it's a very quiet thing, and you're not sure if it's your own voice telling you this, or if it's your intuition, if it's your analytical mind coming in saying, hey, that's what's causing this. But for real, it may be your intuition. So once you get that feeling, and you write that down, and you confirm it by whatever means, your friend goes somewhere, and then you call and say, so I visualize this. Is it similar to where you are? And they say, yeah, that's where I'm at. That's your validation. That's the thing you need. The other thing you want to do is write down the things that you were successful at. Write down the process that was successful. So I did this. When I did this, I had a very successful reading. So I'm going to incorporate that into my next process. Same thing with dowsing. Dowsing's a little different because you want to have the dowsing tool that you feel comfortable with, that you have, it sounds a little woo-woo, but that you feel comfortable with, right? If you have a dowsing tool and it's not really feeling it for you, especially with the pendulum, some people like metal, some people like crystal, some people like stone. What your affinity is important. And some people will say with the dowsing pendulums that the material is different for the different uses. For chakra checks or health checks, you want a different kind of pendulum than you do for Ouija questions. So it's all dependent on the person. There's no right or wrong method for using a pendulum. It's all a matter of how you feel about it. But when you first learn to do it, you want to find the process that works for you. So that's why keeping a journal, oh, this was successful when I did this, when I used this under these circumstances. That journal will then guide you next time, okay, this is what I did. Let's try it again, see if I get the same kind of positive results. So just like anything, if you're shooting a basket for basketball, if you're throwing the ball to the catcher, you tweak a little bit of what you were doing until you get those baskets consistently, until you get those strikes consistently with baseball. There's no difference with this process. So that's what you want to do. You have an affinity for your pendulum or your other type of dowsing tool. And they say for dowsing, if you're trying to find something outside, like water or a mineral or any other object, people can hide an object for you and you can go outside and find it. You can find it within your house. But what you want to do is walk outside, sometimes barefoot, and kind of connect to the energies of the earth. And that's what these dowsing folks are saying works for them. And then you take your tool and you use whatever direction you decide is yes or no, and you follow that direction until you get a verified result. So that's where you start. Easy, verified items. The history of the remote viewing, as I said, was our spying against the Soviet Union. What they did there, and this is what's fascinating, some of these remote viewers are so, like Joe McMonagle was so talented, such amazing psychics. All they needed were the coordinates for a location, and he could look at that location and find what was going on there. So it's almost like Google, but it's better than Google because you don't have to be terribly specific in your search engine for remote viewing or dowsing to find what the intention is there. And once you have said, okay, my intention is to find this object for this person, setting the intention is highly important. So you've connected to your device, you've connected to that thought process in your mind, and then you set your intention to do what you'd like it to do. All right? After that, then you go through the process. Now, the thing we found with remote viewing is something called analytical overlay. That's where our analytical brain says, oh, it's the Eiffel Tower. That's what I'm drawing. And I say, no. You can't do that until you get verification. And it's like the song in your head or the picture you see of the duck or the rabbit, right? You've seen those. You can't stop seeing the duck or the rabbit. So analytical overlay is basically like that. If you have an idea of what it already is, then you're losing the process and everything's going to be confirming that incorrect information. So it's really important that when you have that, you walk away. And then you come back when you aren't thinking about that, when you have the fresh mind, maybe a fresh piece of paper. So that's the other thing you have to be careful of, is that your brain's already going to come up with the answer. So those are the things that you want to do for remote viewing and for dowsing. Now, I don't know if anybody knows Uri Geller.
Yeah.
Right. Spoonbender. He came to the United States and he was working with the Stanford research people, the same people came up with remote viewing, to test him and see if he was really that good. He was pretty good in the laboratory. Unfortunately, when he went on Johnny Carson, he was stumped. So they thought he was a fraud all the way around. But actually what it was, and this happens with a lot of psychics, I'm on stage. They expect me to do something. I'm going to use a little prestidigitation instead of my psychic ability, and that's where he got caught. But he did have legitimate abilities. He was famous for spoon-bending, but when he went back to Israel after his time in the United States, he was dowsing for minerals and became very wealthy. So what's interesting though, and what I've learned from the research, the remote viewers and dowsers, is that if they try to douse for a large sum of money, it doesn't seem to work. However, there are people who have doused for the smaller lotteries or something along those lines, and they've done pretty good. So if you're looking for $50,000 here or there, you could try putting in the numbers and finding, okay, let me see what, the count 3 is going to be tonight. See how successful you are. That's one of the ways you can verify whether it works. Lottery, why not? Win $100. Right. So another idea there. One of the other things that happened, famous situation with Dowsing, was a harpist who had her harp stolen. I believe it was in the UK, somewhere in London. Nobody could find it. And if nobody can find it, you go to somebody because you're desperate. So she found a dowser who was advertising their ability to find things. And the dowser would take a map of London and use a piece of paper or a ruler. Move the ruler and douse, is it here? Move it, douse, is it here? Move it, douse. And finally triangulated using a map and a ruler and just drew pencil lines until he could find the center part, and it was there. That's where they found the part. So that's another way to use it. So missing people, missing objects, dowsing for minerals and water, so forth. Now we're going to have a little fun with the audience. Hopefully you're interested in playing a little dowsing or remote viewing game. Yeah? We're going to go ahead and set up the game, so if you give us just a minute. So this is a metal tool. There's a couple of different ways you can handle a pendulum. Some people like it like this. Some people like it hang over their finger like that. No wrong way. Whatever feels comfortable in your hand. But the idea is that you get it started. You see I'm barely moving my hand? Well, what happens is it changes direction due to something called ideomotor reactions, the small micro muscle movements in the wrist. See, it's starting to change direction. Barely moving my hand. So what you can do, and I'll move these apart so it's a little easier to see. What you can do with the pendulum is put it over the top, start your process. I'm going to say that to and from me is yes and no, side to side, excuse me, to and from me is yes, side to side is no. So this is saying no to me. So that is basically how you would do it. So if anybody wants to come up and try the pendulum and see if they can find the object. Sorry? I would start it moving so that it has some momentum to get to either the yes or no, but some people start at a stopped position and then it starts moving. There's no wrong answer, it's how you feel it should work for you. Like I said, this is intuition. It's about how you feel about the object and how it's working for you. So don't tell the audience what you think it is, but keep it in mind. Well, this is the part of your brain you don't want to use, is the analytical part. You want to avoid that and just think as if you were in a daydream. You're not really thinking anything at all. You're in a very relaxed state, and then the answer kind of comes to you. So you don't want to really force it into the analytical part, like, well, where would it most likely be? That's the analytical brain. You don't actually want to try the guess. You just want to let it come to you in a very natural way. Just remember, this is a tool. What's really happening is you're getting information to your mind that's telling you something that you shouldn't know. Nobody has shown you where this is, so this information is coming to you from intuition or psychic memories. Our next process is going to be remote viewing. So we're going to hand out some pieces of paper and pencils. And what you're going to remote view is the object under the cup. So as I said, you just want to say, I want to know what the object under the cup is, and you're going to just doodle. And you're going to write descriptives. Color, texture, so what it looks like, what it feels like, what it might sound like, what it might smell like. All of those things are valid. Those are all clairvoyant methods. Clairvoyance is not just things that pop into your head. Some people have taste, some people hear voices, some people feel a touch, some people might smell something like perfume. All of those are clairvoyance. So use all of your senses, not just the one that you're used to, which is visual.